Well, too often the council is just looking to next year or maybe 2 or 3 years ahead. But it is important that we take a further look into the future. Young people who are born now will be living in Hampshire 30, 40 years' time. Are there any mistakes we can avoid? Are there any things that if we did them now would make life that much easier for those young people in 30 or so years' time?
If you've got a rotating wheel and you have the ability to just touch it with your hand and move it along and change the direction slightly, then that's where you bring in your influence. And I think that's what we can do.
There's a lovely cross-section of people with different views and looking at some really powerful and influential topics that are going to make a big impact on Hampshire.
Let's be really clear about the climate science. What the climate science is telling us is that less carbon in the atmosphere is resulting in much bigger changes than anticipated. 1. 2, climate science has always been conservative in outlook for reasons about the response from civil society. So we did think we could go for 2 degrees to avoid dangerous climate change. That's 1.5 degrees. I often do a pub quiz about what the temperature change is at the moment from pre-industrial levels. It's 1.1 degree. Some monthly totals during the year are well above 1.5. Important issues like the East Antarctica ice sheet, which was considered to be stable, was found this year not to be stable. If we lose that, we get 70 metres of sea level rise. 12 years to decarbonise our economy is an absolute critical non-negotiable target. And even looking at the flood projections we're confronted with, as Liz has described them, that would be 1 to 1.5 metres by end of the century. If you stand on the East Anglian coast, if you stand in your patch, I ask you to reflect about whether you think we're ready. And that's an open question, but I would say with all the professional expertise I can muster to you as a commission, we are critically unprepared for this agenda.
The impact of our lifestyles on the environment and how that is going to affect life in 2050, which actually has become more and more important to me. So I think the very material side of our life needs careful thought about by 2050.
The changing climate absolutely impacts on everything that we do. There is just nothing that is untouched. It needs to change how we think about and plan for the future. And I think the scale and pace of climate change is such now that we do need to think quite differently. This is no longer about small incremental shifts, about building sea defences slightly higher. It is about a step change in thinking. We absolutely haven't got all the answers. But it has a multiplier effect for other challenges and pressures. So already heard about, obviously, population growth. We all get older, don't we, every day? The population is growing and the impact that a changing climate has on vulnerable communities, obviously around the world, where that's felt very acutely. But that's not just an issue over there, that's an issue here. So it does have the potential to exacerbate some of the inequalities that already exist within our communities. And it's another pressure on our planet's precious resources. And it does mean, actually, the scale and pace of climate change that we need to act much faster and we need to go much further than ever before on both reducing emissions, but also on making sure that we can adapt to the fact that climate is changing. It is absolutely not about one or the other. But as the head of the World Economic Forum has said, it's not about a choice between whether we adapt or mitigate. We have to do both. It's like walking and breathing.
Changing climate. Our vision. Recognising the changing climate as the biggest threat, a well-adapted and resilient Hampshire will be essential to ensure Hampshire's economy, environment and society continues to thrive and prosper. Our policy. Develop and promote a focus on embedding climate resilience and mitigation across key policies and sectors, working with communities across Hampshire. Recommendations. Ensure that climate resilience and mitigation, e.g. energy and water efficient, flood and heat adapted, is a primary objective for infrastructure and buildings, existing and new, services, businesses, the natural environment, including environmental services, landscape, heritage, and health and well-being. Prioritise the reduction of carbon emissions from the key sectors of housing and transport. Support, enable and empower communities to be more resilient and work together to respond to the impacts of a changing climate, e.g. flooding and heat waves. Develop policies to support the transition to clean, locally generated renewable energy, reduce waste and support the sourcing of local sustainable produce, natural resources and employment.
These were the kind of 6-7 trends that we identified as likely to have big impacts on the way the world works. So at the top there, technological change, of course, is really important, and I'll keep coming back to that. But we also have things, globalization, political uncertainty, the climate change. There's huge other drivers in the world that we should be taking note of and not just thinking about the impact of automation on work. But actually, AI and technology is going to influence our lives much more than in robots like this. So in our phones, in our laptops, probably even in our fridges. When you look at the stats, women and ethnic minorities are much less likely to become innovators. So women account for under 25% of those in the STEM workforce in the UK.
And the point here is we have to have diversity in every aspect of what we do because of the problems of bias in data and bias in algorithms. Data creation is going to be a huge job in the future. And all these issues are worse for AI, and the lack of diversity across the board is so important. And we need interdisciplinary teams. We don't just need scientists, we need philosophers, historians, geographers, psychologists, sociologists to be part of this world. It doesn't mean everybody's got to be a mathematician or a computer scientist, but we do need more of them as well. So it's sort of pushing on all buttons, and that's my role this year. We've got the first flurry of stuff out the door, but we've got to make sure the people going into these jobs come from diverse backgrounds. So Karen used to say, computing is too important to be left to men. And that wasn't to denigrate men, it was to say, actually, it's so important, we're all going to use it, everybody's got to be involved.
One of the questions that we have is obviously an ageing population and a much reduced workforce in terms of age, and how that workforce will actually be supported by AI and robots, and what actual learning they themselves will need to have in the future.
Technology could enable people with restricted movement to be able to enjoy recreation. And then when you think about an aging population with less to do, what impact that could have on retired people or people who are finding it harder to get out, we see that technology and recreation could help each other out greatly.
Changing technology. Our vision. Hampshire should take advantage of the opportunities of technology to people, place and economy, maximising the benefits whilst mitigating against the negative impacts. Our policy. Prioritise a focus on opportunities offered by technology to enhance business and economy, public services, social infrastructure and connectivity that complement rather than compromise human relationships and quality of life. Recommendations. Understand the role of the public sector to enable and maximise the opportunities of new technologies, including access to and use of data, ensuring all members of the community can engage and benefit from this. Equip all sectors of society with the skills required to take advantage of technological advances with a specific focus on diversity and inclusivity. Maximise the benefits offered by artificial intelligence to improve public services, particularly in the health and social care sector. Address digital exclusion and support those with no or lower skills to secure the basic as a route to a good job. Prioritise high-speed broadband infrastructure for existing housing and planned developments across Hampshire as a vital component to growing a sustainable local economy. Improve active and low-emission transport, prioritise public and shared transport and maximise the potential of artificial intelligence and data analytics in future transport in both urban and rural areas. Ensure future transport projects are closely linked with emerging technologies and business models such as mobility as a service.
I think with the business situation looking forward, one of the biggest problems we face in Hampshire is the cost of housing. So smaller businesses trying to attract people from outside Hampshire to join them, and then some of the social services, things like domiciliary care workers. We just can't find enough places for them to live that are affordable. So that affects both the social services and small businesses.
Just a quick slide. So we will look at each town. I did do ones for all the Hampshire towns, but you'd be bored senseless if I went through all of them. But this is just to show that we'll pick a town and analyse it and see what are the leading occupations. Now, Reading is a digital tech centre, and I've highlighted the IT sort of jobs. And I can tell you on the slide for Portsmouth, there are 4 highlights, and the slide for Southampton, there are 2 highlights. Now, this is interesting, because this is real time, okay? Someone mentioned Barclays going to Glasgow, okay? I'm doing this project now. This is a major financial institution doing exactly what Barclays have done. They want a tech centre. So this is a tech-focused project, but from a bank, basically. And they're looking, and this is them, they said, right, we want to see these locations. And the locations they've asked us to look at are Newbury, Oxford, Reading, Bath, Bristol, Swindon, Southampton, Basingstoke, Monmouthshire and Newport, God knows why, and Guildford. But the good news is, Southampton's on the radar, and Basingstoke's on the radar. And actually, I've done another analysis where I included Farnborough, because I know from previous analysis that Farnborough stacks up very well. It's not on that one because I can only do 10 places in that software, and I had to drop one for that to add in Swindon, which they wanted to add in, to see what that looked like. But so you can add on an 11th location, which would be Farnborough. But again, you can see that's the brutal reality. Where are they going to go? I'll give you 50 quid each if they go to Southampton, because they're probably not.
Everything in life is interconnected, and in fact, one of the words which has most resonated for me has been connectivity. And that's connectivity not just in the technological sense, but in the social inclusion sense and the mobility sense.
Changing economy. Our vision. A thriving and prosperous economy is essential to support excellent public services, provide high quality and inclusive employment and business opportunities, maintain and enhance the quality of life in Hampshire, and reduce inequality and economic exclusion. Our policy. Maintain a focus on fostering a knowledge-based and sustainable Hampshire economy, working closely with businesses and relevant agencies in Hampshire, including our universities. Recommendations. Develop the place story for Hampshire to define a Hampshire brand to promote, support and encourage appropriate economic development and a compelling narrative to cohere business, communities, the neighbouring cities of Portsmouth and Southampton and the Isle of Wight around a unified approach and vision. Maintain, regenerate and develop vibrant settlements across Hampshire to offer attractive, stimulating and thriving business and cultural and residential environments and communities. Maximise opportunities for employment and inclusion through targeted upskilling, both in terms of key sectors and softer skills such as creativity, innovation and work readiness. Maximise and prioritise support for the key sectors, digital, creative, aerospace, defence and marine, to build on the existing strengths in these areas. Enable Hampshire to maintain its position as an attractive place where people want to visit, live, work and take advantage of the leisure and cultural offer. For example, promoting tourism, providing authentic experiences and developing current and future business hubs. to secure economically critical infrastructure investment in Hampshire, especially where it will support greater internationalisation of our economy, for example through international trade and inward investment. Develop in partnership clear plans to set out where business districts are to be developed, incorporating Grade A offices, high quality residential and public realm with clear connectivity to transport and hubs and networks. Embracing the opportunities of the advantages of digital and other technology to support the Hampshire economy. Capitalise on Hampshire's university capacity to maximise local benefits from rollouts, startups and emerging technologies, and to retain more graduates living and working in Hampshire.
Here in Hampshire, as I hope you're aware, you have the highest traffic volume of any authority in the UK. Okay? Just under 10 billion vehicle miles. Tax the width of vehicles. Do you realise what impact that would have on congestion and better utilisation of existing infrastructure? There are so many things that we could be doing. 17 to 20-year-olds in 92, 55% of them knew how to drive. Now it's down to 30%. Absolute collapse. That workforce is the workforce that's leaving this area because they are dependent on public transport, so they will spend £3,000–4,000 on a bicycle, but unless they've got access to public transport, they are out of here.
The key is access, and I'm going to go through that fairly quickly. The clustering of dynamic companies, educational institutions key. We do not make anywhere like the type of capability leverage that we need and could do out of Southampton Airport and Farnborough Airport. We are a highly innovative area and region within the UK, and we should be able to build that.
I would like to see Hampshire diverse. I would like to see its various communities, whether it's urban or rural, because Hampshire has got a lot of rural kind of countryside and people living in the country as well. I'd like to see that all of them are taken account of in some way and that they feel as though it is a good place to live for a good quality of life.
You have a brand that you need to be looking after. Hampshire exists as a brand. It's there. What are you doing about it? You need to be place-led, not organisation-led. We're in a world of collaboration. We're in a world where there is austerity in the public sector. You have to be place-led. And that means engaging, empowering and exciting your stakeholders and getting them connected with place. So we've taken a quick look at Hampshire, but it is interesting in that it has brought up some very interesting and exciting opportunities. What we do when we are thinking about place and place stories, what is Hampshire going to be for? Who is it going to be for? How is it special? Not unique, because very few places have unique things. And then when you've got that story, how do you play it out? So what we did was we did a heck of a lot of research, and most critically in this was the workshop, which was a private public sector workshop. So the first thing we did was we did what we would call a personification exercise. So basically, if Hampshire rocks up at your doorstep and you open the door, what is stood in front of you? So traditional, yes, knowledgeable, which I think we've heard a lot about knowledge, but too comfortable, too insular, too apathetic, and confused. And that confused is confused about what on earth is its identity, what are the opportunities, what are the game changers for Hampshire. And the good bit is aerospace, countryside, 2 national parks, location, which we've talked about and heard about, 2 critical place hub cities, which you have to have. Because if you want young people, they want universities, they want cities, etc. Really, really important. Innovation, R&D, the defence bit, and then a whole host of things around quality of life. I mean, that's just an amazing 2 slides.
I want the countryside to be still there and accessible to people who live in towns and cities as well as people who live in the country.
In my opinion, This is a right of everybody who lives in Hampshire and other places to enjoy and expect to see their countryside maintained and the heritage maintained. We need to collaborate more as farmers, we need to get sharper and wiser and work with other people quicker. I think the results will come quicker, and I think the public will hopefully engage with us more.
Green infrastructure, trees, which is another, trees and other greenery can take 10 degrees off a city centre. London, the difference between London's green belt and its central London is 8 to 10 degrees, which can kill people. But the brilliant thing about the Europeans in Amsterdam is that rather than having lots of green bling and a very long report, they just had a brilliant scheme where they knocked a hole in the pavement and gave the residents €20 to grow a vine up their buildings.
Changing environment. Our vision. Recognise Hampshire's natural and historic environment and the service it provides as its most valued asset and an essential component of Hampshire's attractiveness and prosperity. Our policy. Develop and promote a focus on sustaining and enhancing Hampshire's environment to strengthen Hampshire's economy and society. Recommendations. Work with partners to understand and develop key strategies and policies that recognise the benefits of net environmental gain across all sectors. Develop and promote community resilience and individual health and well-being by taking full advantage of Hampshire's natural environment. Develop initiatives to tackle urban-rural divide and deliver equitable local capacity and resilience, for example, a better management of urban sprawl. Tackle the major causes of poor air quality with a specific focus on reducing harmful emissions. Recognise the multiple value of green infrastructure and advocate for the provision of green spaces to be one of the fundamental drivers in planning policy. Promote a joined-up approach that links local authorities, health bodies and civil society to deliver greater access to nature for all, for example optimising access to country parks and extending public right-of-ways. Ensure that future development makes the optimum use of available land, prioritising brownfield regeneration.
What's troubling is there's no immediate and obvious solution to many of the problems that we know we face today and will face tomorrow. But what's also quite reassuring is that there are jobs tomorrow that we can't conceive of today. There are going to be new technologies that will help solve the problems that we know will arise. And it's been good to get to grips with a bit of that.
In education at the moment, that there's a debate and people are on two sides. There's the skills people, there's the knowledge people. And actually what we are trying to say is there's an absolute middle ground. You definitely need a broad-based knowledge. We think studying a wide range of subjects for a longer period of time is really important. It's definitely not either or, it's both. But skills really should be potentially more embedded into young people's education.
One of the things I think we've got to do and secure for 2050 is an appropriately structured and funded school system that continues to raise aspiration and encourage young people to aspire to be as good as they possibly can be and to recognise that they are the leaders of tomorrow.
Changing population and society. Our vision. Communities that are connected, diverse, sustainable and happy are the cornerstone of a thriving, equitable and prosperous society, placing people at the centre so a culture of resilience and self-help can be nurtured. Our policy. Maintain a focus on promoting the evolution and development of communities that support equity, connectivity, diversity, sustainability and resilience. Recommendations. Develop a coherent framework for building communities that delivers a more integrated approach to design and development. Work with partners and communities to foster community resilience, cohesion and inclusion through placemaking. Prioritise physical and mental health within community shaping to maximise multiple benefits, e.g. green spaces with more walking and cycling routes to support physical well-being can reduce anxiety. Maximise opportunities to improve productivity and adapt service delivery with a particular focus on health and social care to respond to the changing demographics. Support employers to extend the productive capacity of the workforce by recognising health and well-being benefits of employment, good work, and embracing new and more flexible ways of working. Provide access to appropriate housing and services to support greater independent and integrated living for older residents and those with additional need, with a particular focus on health and social care and support for intergenerational living. Make Hampshire more attractive to a wider age range, for example by providing access to housing, employment, cultural and leisure amenities to attract and retain younger people. Maximise the provision of affordable housing to attract and retain key workers by ensuring access to appropriate housing. Public service agencies should work in partnership with local communities to design and deliver services. Advocate for a wider measure of happiness and quality of life to be incorporated into key policies within key public sector organisations through, for example, the role of volunteering and providing meaning and community coherence. Better understand the current and future skills needs and work with employers and education and skills providers to promote widely accessible training and development opportunities, prioritising new skills. Secure a reduction in levels of absolute deprivation across Hampshire.
Listening to the wide range of people have been presenting to us has been just incredible, really, and a great privilege to do that. And our challenge now as commissioners is to turn that into something useful for Hampshire and for the future.